Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabe Alonso, and I'm super excited to be here this morning talking with all of you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Movable Ink. I hope you're all staying safe and sane. But let's dig right in, right? So today I'd like to talk a little bit about finding your brand purpose. But before that, I just want to introduce myself for those who may not know me. So again, I'm Gabe Alonso, currently the head of digital for the PepsiCo Energy portfolio. I just started here almost 3 months ago, so I'm pretty brand new. Before that, I was at Activision for almost 3 years, leading CRM strategy, where I worked on essentially the owned, channel ecosystem. So email, SMS, our in-game messages, as well as our mobile app. And then before I moved down here to Activision in LA, I was at Nike before that, where I started in the global social team, running social for the global running category, and then eventually moved into membership, where I was on the team that essentially helped design and eventually execute the sort of first iteration of what we now know to be the Nike Plus membership program. So it's grown a lot since I've left, but it was awesome being a part of that team. Prior to that, I'm East Coast born and bred, so after college I moved to New York, where I worked at some really awesome places, started my career at MTV doing production, have some really awesome VMA Movie Awards stories that I could always tell you, maybe over a virtual beer or certainly maybe a DM on Twitter. Moved over to 360i after that, where I really cut my teeth in digital, and then was at Gilt.com before heading out to the West Coast, working on men's editorial strategy, and then eventually moving into actually leading social for the entire brand. The last thing I'll say is, as a lot of people did, we kind of presciently got a puppy before COVID happened, and so that's my cute little dog, Piper. She's an Australian Shepherd, both the love of my life and bane of my existence at times, as I'm sure a lot of you with puppies have. But my fiance and I have been super happy, to have her with us during these crazy times. So, anyways, with that, I will dig right in. So I'd like to start with this sort of battle-tested brief of ours, right? In a world where, I always think of I hear that movie guy voice, and, I remember being at 360i, and a lot of our briefs would start this way because it puts you in a place, it puts you in a certain frame of mind, right? Especially as it sets up the rest of your work or your brief or your pitch. But I don't think any of us could have imagined the world that we live in right now. This world is kind of nuts, right? And for marketers, everything we know has completely shifted. Brand plans have either changed or completely just been shuttered, or certainly entirely pivoted. Marketing budgets have been slashed and repurposed for other reasons. And then most importantly, consumer needs have completely changed. I feel like even as a consumer myself, but also as a marketer, no one wants to hear those pithy marketing one-liners anymore. Certainly not a few months ago, and still I feel like there's a sort of lack of patience and wanting to kind of deal with all of that currently from the consumer base. It's kind of about survival, right? It's no longer, how many discounts are you going to give me? How valuable is something? How do you save money for my wallet? It's more of, how do you make my life better? How can you make me more comfortable right now? How do you make me more sane and take my mind off all the nonsense that's going on around me, right? Before COVID, the consumer's mind was on value, convenience, and quality. After COVID, it's completely shifted from a brand perspective, right? Now consumers are asking, well, what do you stand for? Can I trust you? Are you going to make my life better today? You're going to make me feel seen, right? Suddenly, the focus that was once on the consumer, and very much the consumer pushing towards the brand, very one way. This entire kind of era we find ourselves in has completely ushered in a new era of marketing, right? This pivot. And this pivot now is one that takes the weight and the onus of the relationship off the consumer, and certainly puts it way more on the brand. Now I have arrows here showing that it's a two-way relationship, because I do think that's important, because the brand needs to provide signals to the consumer to react to so that the brand can continue to evolve and change, right? So it's certainly a cyclical thing. But let's make no mistake about it, right? It's no longer what can I as the consumer do for you, the brand, but more of what have you, the brand, done for me? And especially what have you done for me lately in these crazy times? Now, the good thing is that if anything positive has come out of this pandemic and, just the crazy uncertain times we live in, is that veil has lifted, the veil of purpose, the veil of sort of faux authenticity, right? The brands that sort of wax poetic pre-COVID about fancy CSR initiatives or how they produce products sustainably or treated their employees, in a positive and good way, now kind of ring a little hollow, or seem inauthentic. And so in some cases, frankly, it's been not entirely true, which is, the worst of it all. And now those brands are sort of fighting for survival, right? Or at the very least, they're taking their second chance and moving very deliberately, because they understand now that, again, the veil has been lifted. You can't hoodwink your consumers anymore. Everybody's incredibly aware of, the messages being put out towards them. And so I want to take a step back again and talk about that question of, can I trust you, right? And I'm going to bring up an old adage that I love and I bring up constantly. And that is that Rome wasn't built in a day, right? And like Rome, trust isn't built in a day. It takes time to build and grow. You need to lay brick after brick after brick, but eventually you'll have a strong foundation on which to continue building from, both trust overall, but specifically trust with your relationships you have within your consumers, right? But like Rome, what took a lifetime to build, generations to build, can also be taken away in one, right? And this is maybe the lesser known, far sassier, throwing shade version of the adage of, it wasn't built in a day, but it burned in one. And I think the same thing can be said for brands, where, your trust can be built within years, months, decades, however long you've been around. But it just takes one moment, one misstep, one wrong statement, or whatever that may be, and it all comes crashing down. So you have to be very mindful of how you're coming forward, and also be mindful of things like your values, which we'll talk a little bit about, so that you have that guiding light always. And at the end of the day, the good news is for all of us, as we're trying to find clarity in this kind of muddy waters we live in, trust has now actually become second only to price for why consumers choose a brand. So the first question is, can I afford you? The second one is, can I trust you? I think that's pretty incredible, that trust and that sort of philosophical question is so high up already. 70% of respondents here say that trusting your brand is more important today than it's ever been before. And we're not even done an entire calendar year yet, but that's just how nutty 2020 has already been, right? 40% have actually convinced friends to stop using a brand because they felt that brand was acting inappropriately. So now you don't even have to worry specifically about your consumers leaving you for a misstep or, a wrong statement or whatever. Now you have to worry about the influence of their friends and the communities around them to say, don't do this. And as we know, friend influence and family influence is huge when it comes to buyer and shopping decisions. So the fact that this continues to grow, I think, should be alarming and something worth noting for marketers going forward. And then lastly, 46% of consumers trust the brands that they use and buy. And this might not seem like a big number on its face, but it's up 12 points from 2019. That's a huge jump, right? Because if it was 34%, that's pretty massive. I can't do math. That's 30-ish% more than that of a growth, 30-40% growth. Truly, trust has become a key factor in the brands that consumers choose to align themselves with, now more than ever, but certainly I think going forward. The world has entirely changed. Okay, so you're probably saying, cool, Gabe, I get this. Like, how do I define it? Give me something tangible to go with. Cool. Hopefully this will be that moment for you. I think the big thing that you all need to understand is that a brand's purpose, it isn't your products. Awkward. I know. It's not shilling out cheaper, more discounted goods, direct to consumer, good quality, get it to me fast service. All that has become a cost of entry in this world. And to me, a brand's purpose details how they intend to change the world, right? How they intend to make it better. So if before, to use some of my current and former employees, if this is what the equation was, that's no longer the case. And ultimately, what this brings up is a bit of a philosophical dilemma, right? And certainly a philosophical question. And that is, if my brand isn't the products we make, and the products we make aren't our purpose, then what are we, right? So many brands these days, and before, and I'm sure more to come after, have allowed their products to define who they are and what they provide to their consumers. And so we're ultimately faced with an existential crisis. And I don't know about you, but this actually does keep me up at night at times to figure out, especially in my new role, what do we stand for that isn't the products we provide? Because that's what I know will ultimately create that distinction and that connection with the consumers that we want to talk to, right? And so the way I'm thinking about it is basically threefold, right? So it begins with first finding your consumer. And that's probably pretty straightforward and you probably know who they are, but you'd be surprised at how many brands can't quite pin down who it is that they're talking to. Is it parents? Is it Gen Z? Are they boomers? Is it specific, like females 18 to 24 in suburban areas, an hour from key cities, right? You have a very specific niche that you're going after. Again, be specific. Now, some of the brands that I'll talk about later, they may seem broad, but when they talk about a group of consumers that have consistent beliefs and ideals and needs, which we'll go to in a second, that becomes specific enough for them because it's not the whole world. It's not anybody who needs a pair of shoes or anybody who needs to put a shirt on, right? And then ultimately keep them at the center of everything that you do. You should obsess your consumer and put them at the center of everything that you do. And how do you do that? Well, first you have to understand what do they need, right? They're humans too. So it's not a functional need, like I said before. It could be more humane needs, feeling seen, giving a voice to the underrepresented, standing up for a specific set of beliefs, right? Ultimately, these needs should also line up with your core values and what you want your brand to stand for. Because hopefully what your brand stands for is serving that need for the consumer set that you've just defined. And consistently serving this need now is how you ultimately develop trust. And then lastly, it's the how, right? Okay, who, you have the what, now how do I do it? Well, you need to design experiences that add value and enrich your relationship with your consumer based off of the needs that you've defined. Create content that instills and cultivates trust. Empathy, I think, is super key here, right? If you spent the last 8 months in quarantine and trying to figure out how to stay sane, well, your brand should be talking about discounts and new products and things like that. They should be talking about, yeah, we hear you, we empathize, we also are stuck at home, but here's how we put our spin on it, or whatever that may be, right? Bring empathy, bring positivity. And ultimately, remember, it's your actions and what you say that define your brand. not your products. And to me, this is where brand really comes to life, right? It's the sum total of all these trust and value building experiences. All these things begin to define who you are as a brand and thus provide better context for the consumer. So now I'll go quickly through a few brands that I think are doing it well, and then we'll wrap up. The first, my alma mater of sorts, Nike, right? Nike, their consumer base seems broad, all athletes, but they've purposely done that, right? Their mission is to inspire athletes with, to bring inspiration and innovation to all athletes, asterisks, and it's if you have a body, you're an athlete. And athletes, whether you like it or whether it feels broad or not, all have a certain set of needs, need to get better, stronger, faster, right? Especially when it comes to the playing field. And the playing field is sort of the great equalizer for skill and talent. And that is where Nike's purpose has come in especially strong this year, where their purpose has become to bring equality to that playing field for whether you're, brown or black or LGBTQ, etc., right? Athletes whose values and rights haven't felt seen or haven't been respected, Nike is standing up for that consumer set and providing a point of view that shares that they have their back. And I think because of that, they are one of the brands that have really risen to the top during sort of these crazy COVID times. The second brand is Patagonia. Patagonia has really put their money where their mouth is lately as it pertains to things like climate change, saving state lands. I see them posting about California lands that, state lands that might be endangered in terms of being, removed from the specific classifications and such. It's not, their content is actually less about their vests and jackets and clothes and product and more about what are we doing to change this world? What are we doing to save it? What are we doing to make it better? Specifically as it pertains to environmental policy and climate change, right? And so from a politically active company, they've decided to put purpose before profit and really stick to their guns as it pertains to what they are here to do. And then the last brand that I personally love and have loved since I was a wee toddler is Lego. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Lego's story, but almost 10 years ago, they were kind of at their knees. And then they pivoted. They pivoted completely to this new mission of inspiring and developing the builders of tomorrow, focusing on children as their role models and establishing a system of play that kind of drives never-ending creativity, right? And through that, they've gone from being practically bankrupt to one of the most beloved brands in the world. And it's simply because they kept their purpose at their core, right? They put purpose over profit. Their purpose was to inspire and develop the builders of tomorrow, to bring joy of building and the pride of creation. All of these things just became central to what they do and essential to what they do. And it's, paid back dividends immensely. And so I'll wrap up quickly by saying a few things. One, trust is more important than ever. As the world gets crazier, consumers are going to look to brands and entities that align with them to give them clarity and also comfort. So be there for them. The second thing is that products are not your purpose. Consumers expect more, so, act accordingly. And then lastly, put the consumer at the center of everything you do. Make them feel super special. And if you do that, I hope that not only will you have found your purpose, but you will also have found that from a business perspective, you'll find great success. So thank you very much. That's my time. It's been an absolute pleasure.